Hey, this is Professor Fay with your anatomy lesson of the day. Today we'll talk about the femur. So here is the proximal anterior look at the bone. This is the thigh bone and it forms in part your hip joint. It has the head of the femur, this big circular structure that articulates with the acetabulum on the os coxa. So that's the head. And then there's this constricted area called the neck of the femur. And then you can see this is the greater trochanter, and then the lesser trochanter. So you can see those from the anterior side. And then if I rotate this around, you can also see the greater trochanter and the lesser trochanter from the posterior side. Posteriorly, these are connected by a ridge of bone called the intertrochanteric crest. So you can see that pretty prominent there. And then on the anterior surface, they're connected by a much more subtle ridge of bone called the intertrochanteric line. If we go back to the posterior side and find that greater trochanter again and come down just a little bit distally on the shaft of the femur, you can see the gluteal tuberosity. And then if we keep following that down, you see this ridge of line here, that's all the linea aspera. That brings us to the distal end of the bone where we can see the medial and lateral condyles. So you can look for the head of the femur, that's always going to be pointing medially into the hip joint. And then that would be the medial condyle. And then the other one then is the lateral condyle. Each condyle has an epicondyle, a smaller bump of bone on it. So the medial condyle has the medial epicondyle right there. And the lateral condyle has the lateral epicondyle right there. In between the two condyles is a really pretty big fossa called the intercondylar fossa. And so if you wanted to tell if the femur was a right or left femur, a really easy way to do it is to point the head of the femur medially, and then decide if you're looking at the anterior side of the bone or the posterior side of the bone. A really good landmark is that intercondylar fossa is very apparent on the posterior side of the bone. So if you put the head of the femur facing medially and the intercondylar fossa, which you don't see right now because it's facing posteriorly, we can say that this would be a right femur.